You are a logistical error in a cheap suit, and frankly, you're obstructing the passage of people who actually have destinations worth reaching. This boarding lane is for the architects of the sky, not for a social loiterer who likely bartered his way into a seat. Step back into the terminal before I have you detained for interference. Captain Silas Thorne didn't just speak. He projected a cockpit-level arrogance that suggested he owned the horizon. He stood at the center of the classic private terminal gate, an environment of aggressive prestige. High-gloss marble floors, brass-framed flight boards, and a massive, tiered crystal chandelier that hummed with the electric tension of the departure lounge. Silas stood with his pilot's cap tucked under his arm, his hands empty, staring with absolute disdain at the man standing at the front of the line. The man was Elias Vane, a man with deeply pigmented mahogany skin and a quiet authority that seemed to make the aircraft outside look like mere toys. He was dressed in a bespoke camel hair overcoat with a silk turtleneck, new outfit. "My documentation is in order, Captain," Elias said, his voice a low, melodic resonance that seemed to steady the frantic energy of the gate. "I suggest you return to your pre-flight checks and leave the manifest to the ground crew. The manifest is my kingdom, and I don't permit anomalies in my cabin." Silas interrupted, his voice rising in a calculated escalation of disdain. "Look at this lounge. Look at these passengers. Do you see anyone else here who looks like they've spent their life waiting for a handout rather than a handoff? You're a ticketing mistake in a camel coat. You don't belong on this flight. You belong in the standby line of a regional bus station. Security, purge this stowaway from the gate before he taints the first-class cabin." The terminal didn't fall silent. It filled with the sharp, jagged laughter of the surrounding elite travelers. A man in a navy blue pinstripe suit leaned against a brass luggage cart, smirking at Elias with clinical high society disdain. "Honestly, Captain," the man laughed, swirling a takeaway espresso as if it were vintage wine. "He's very committed to the role. Documentation. Maybe he's the new Sky Marshal's intern? Someone should tell him that Vane Air is for the architects of industry, not the people who provide the scaffolding." The woman beside him joined in, pointing a manicured finger at Elias's overcoat. "I'll give him $50 to go carry my trunks to the cargo hold. He looks like he's built for the heavy lifting anyway. Go on, Silas. Clear the air before the cabin pressure becomes pedestrian." 12 people in the background were ostensibly minding their business, checking gold watches or reading financial journals, but 8 others were acting as active witnesses, leaning in to catch every second of the humiliation with judgmental grins. "Thanks for the support. We couldn't do this without you. Subscribe for free to help us keep bringing you more stories. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments." Now, back to the story. Silas, emboldened by the social jury, took the escalation to its peak. In a moment of raw, unposed physical aggression, he didn't just point. He snatched the boarding pass from Elias's hand and ripped it into 4 pieces, throwing the scraps onto the marble floor, then reached for the gate intercom to call for the police. "I said stay on the ground," Silas hissed, his face twisted in a mask of vicious mockery. "I'm exercising my right to refuse carriage to a suspicious person. Your journey ends on this floor." The laughter in the gate was a physical weight. Elias didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He slowly looked down at the shredded paper on the marble, then back at Silas, his eyes meeting the pilot's with a coldness that caused the terminal's warmth to vanish. "You've spent your life thinking 4 stripes on a sleeve make you the master of the air, Silas," Elias whispered, the coldness in his tone causing the witnesses' laughter to die instantly. "But you forgot that an airline is just a collection of metal and fuel, and I am the one who owns the sky. You didn't just rip a boarding pass. You just assaulted the chairman of Vane Aerospace, the man who signed your contract this morning. And as of this second, I've decided to ground you forever." The silence in the gate lounge was deafening, broken only by the hum of the massive, tiered crystal chandelier overhead. Captain Silas Thorne stood frozen, the intercom receiver still gripped in his hand, his triumphant sneer replaced by a mask of sudden, cold dread. On the marble floor, The 4 pieces of the ripped boarding pass lay like a shattered future. Vane Aerospace. Silas's voice was a frantic, thin wheeze. The parent company? No. Elias Vane is a name on a letterhead. He's supposed to be in a boardroom in New York, not standing at a gate in London. I prefer to see my assets in person, Silas. Especially when they've become a liability, Elias said, his melodic resonance filling the terminal. He didn't reach for the shredded paper. He simply adjusted his camel hair overcoat. I flew in to observe our elite service protocol. I believe I've seen enough of your refinement. The heavy glass doors of the executive lounge slid open. The airline's director of operations, Julian Sterling, ran toward the gate, his face the color of bone. He didn't look at Silas. He fell into a deep, terrified bow before Elias. Chairman Vane, I am so sorry. I was at the tarmac gate expecting you to arrive by private car. Julian gasped. Please, tell me the captain hasn't. Tell me our flight is still on schedule. The flight is on schedule, Julian. The captain, however, has reached his final destination, Elias said, his quiet authority pinning Silas to the spot. Captain Thorne here feels that the sky is his kingdom and that he has the right to assault passengers he deems anomalies. Since he finds my presence so suspicious, I'm making it permanent. Trigger the systemic misconduct clause. Revoke his flight certification for every Vane-owned carrier globally, effective 60 seconds ago. No! Silas screamed, his pilot's cap falling to the floor. You can't do that. I've flown for 20 years. You can't ground me over a ticketing dispute. It wasn't a dispute, Silas. It was a character test. You failed, Elias countered, his eyes like cold flint. I'm blacklisting your credentials with the Civil Aviation Authority. You won't even be able to pilot a crop duster by the time my legal team is finished. And as for your architects, Elias turned his gaze toward the 8 witnesses. The man in the navy blue pinstripe suit suddenly found his espresso very interesting, his hand shaking. Julian, identify everyone who found this refuse carriage entertaining. Cancel their memberships. If they want to fly, they can find an airline that doesn't mind hosting bullies. Vane Air is no longer one of them. The 8 witnesses scrambled, their faces masks of raw, irreversible regret as they realized they were now grounded from the world's most exclusive fleet. The woman who had offered $50 for Elias to carry her trunks began to weep, realizing her social status had just crashed. Officer, Elias said, turning to the security team that had arrived. I want to file formal charges for destruction of private property and harassment. The captain needs an escort to the exit and out of the industry. As the police led a sobbing Silas Thorne away, stripping the 4 stripes from his shoulders in front of the 12 guests who were minding their business, the gate became a graveyard for his career. Elias Vane stepped toward the jet bridge, walking over the shredded scraps of his old pass. He didn't need a ticket. He owned the plane.